G'day everyone and welcome back to Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al. I'm really excited to kick off 2026 with you. We've just finished our first full calendar year of podcasts and I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's listened, shared an episode, sent a message or stopped me for a chat. I genuinely appreciate it. This year we're aiming to bring you even more great guests with plenty of practical conversations you can take straight back to your own operation. We'll be featuring more local producers too. People right here in our region who are doing good things, having a crack, who've got great stories worth sharing. I'm also pleased to say that we've got some regular voices returning. Chelsea from Herd Solutions will be joining us on a monthly basis with veterinary updates and timely animal health advice. And Morgs from Elders is back as well, committed to a monthly livestock market update to help us make sense of what's happening and what it might mean on farm. So whether you're listening in the ute, on the tractor or in the yards, welcome back. I'm glad you're here and I hope you enjoy what we've got coming in 2026. Welcome to Digging Deeper. We have our regular guest on, Chelsea. How you going, Chelsea?
I'm going great, Al. It's good to be back again.
I was actually a little nervous to ask that question. How are you going? Because the last few times it hasn't been well, but how's the toe going? Hanging on, is it?
Everything's going really well. The foot's healed up exceptionally well. And I actually even went back to work a week and a half early. And I can say that with confidence now because there seems to be no repercussions from doing that. So it's good to be back working in full capacity again. So
yeah, what's it like when you bang it on the door handle or on your dad's leg when you give him a hug? Is it still giving you grief? Or is it...
Funnily enough, the toenail still hasn't grown back. So it'll be interesting to see if it ever does. But
can it not come back because it's taken all the root out or something?
I don't know because I don't know if there comes a point where if you smashed your toenail off a certain number of times it just gives up on coming back after a while. But they did warn me that the toenail would grow back quite deformed. Right. But at the moment it's just dry sort of skin and there's nothing really there. But it's not really affecting me too badly. And every so often I find myself having to run somewhere even, and I'm certainly not back to running, actual jogs or anything like that, but it does cope fine with things like that. So I probably could stop using this excuse now and maybe start thinking about working on my fitness again. But overall, it's holding up really well, and we've been straight back into scanning heaps of cows every day, and it's held up exceptionally well. So yeah.
Does that foot get close to the back end of the cows, or is it?
I'm still subconsciously protecting it, and so I'm not kicking kick gates with it, and still very much keeping it out of harm's way. I did have a cow, actually a bull, stand on it, doing bull testing a couple of weeks ago, and my heart just sort of stopped. It felt like it stopped for a minute because, it just sort of stamped on it and then got off it straight away. But you're sort of just standing there waiting for it to hurt, wondering if it's going to do anything. And it didn't, and it was fine. But, that sort of stuff makes me more nervous than it probably used to. So,
right. Now, have you got back on the horse yet?
Yeah, I got back on the horse early too. So
That's all going well though?
He come back into work really, really nicely. So probably against medical advice while I was recovering, I sort of hatched a plan so that I could get the horse. I stored the horse close to the arena, and I continued lunging it basically the whole way through my recovery. And I rigged up my moon boot, so I put the steel cap boot inside the moon boot, and I lunged the horse on the arena. And in my head, it was fine. So he actually maintained his fitness because I didn't want to sort of lose all that muscle conditioning over a 6-week period. So probably shouldn't have done that, but I got away with it, so it's okay.
And just going back to that lunging that horse, is that not only fitness, but it's also like you work in the sense that you're teaching it things or showing who's boss or all those other things?
I did also do a little bit of groundwork. Because he is a big boisterous horse, I didn't just want to piff him in the paddock and forget about him for a month. But it is a bit harder to safely do groundwork up close with the horse when you've got a broken foot. So I did try and do a little bit, but it was only 5 to 10 minutes because I was still very much protecting the foot at that point, whereas the lunging felt a lot safer because the horse is away from you on a circle exercising itself. And primarily it was just that muscle conditioning, so I didn't have to go back and, get all that suppleness back that I'd put into it over the last few months. And you can actually do a lot just putting poles and things like that out, getting the horse to step over things, getting it using its muscle and its brain, kept it ticking along really well. And
the round yard, or
just on my arena at home, And so then by the time I got back on the horse, it was like it hadn't had any time off at all. And he just transitioned straight back into ridden work really nicely. So
does he like that sort of work? Or?
I think he does. Yeah, he does. He did genuinely seem to not mind being lunged, which is nice. Works in well with being owned by a vet, where sometimes you've only got 20 minutes to get the horse exercised, and you can save a bit of time not having to tuck it up and everything like that if you just want to pull it out and do a bit of fitness work for 20 minutes and then put it away again. So, he almost seemed to be falling asleep doing it sometimes, I swear. So that was quite nice. And, he sort of settled right down just from having that daily handling, even though I still wasn't riding. So,
yeah. Now, in another life, I was involved in fitness stuff with the human side of things. What sort of time frames do they need to be worked every second day, or do they have rest days?
I generally work on 1 to 2 days a week off when they're in full work. It's very horse specific. I've had horses that, the horse I had when I was a university student, it was a part Arab, so they
can run, can't they?
Oh, they can maintain fitness like no other animal. And it was quite, for me to be jumping a horse that was part Arab was actually, I don't know a single other person that's ever jumped one.
Yeah.
They're actually quite rare. So
why is that? Is that
because they're quite flighty animals as well. So their temperament's not always well suited to jumping and things like that. But for that particular horse, it was quite advantageous. And when I was a uni student, he coped well with a lot less work than I get away with now. So the horse I've got now is a lot bigger. So it, it suffers from heat stress a lot quicker, and it takes a lot more to keep it aerobically fit than a smaller horse. So that's sort of why I sort of had to stay motivated to keep him ticking along.
And he'll lose condition quick, I guess, too.
Yeah, so it just takes them a lot longer to get fit, and they lose it a lot quicker as well. So, and I certainly know a lot of other people that have had quite large framed horses, and that is probably the biggest downside of them, is that they just lose their aerobic fitness very, very quickly just because they're such large animals. So,
Now, last question before we move on. Have you fixed that gate? Have you swung it properly yet?
I've sort of fixed it, actually.
Did you say you've thought of fixing
sort
it?
of.
Oh, you sort
of have. Yeah, no, there's now a... I haven't actually fixed it so the gate can open the other way, but I have got it pretty much permanently tethered open to a fence post that I put in, so that...
That's not sort of fixing it.
It's half fixed.
All right. We spoke last night briefly on the phone about this podcast, and you said there's quite a bit of plant toxicity popping up over the last little couple of weeks. Talk us through a couple of reasons why that might be the case, then we'll talk about some more specifics. Because we've had a fair bit of rain just recently, is this one reason why we're seeing a few of this, is plants getting up and growing? And
yeah, and definitely just the warm, humid weather can bring out some plant toxicities as well. So we've certainly covered in podcasts in the past, how that warm, humid weather can bring out things like your facial eczema and also your paspalum toxicities and ryegrass toxicities as well. So we're anticipating we'll probably start to see a few of those type conditions just with the autumn rain we've had over the last couple of weeks. And
and just give us a refresher on some of those. So we've got the sentinel things for the facial eczemas.
Actually, and on that note, I did actually see a post by Dairy Australia that those spore counts are starting to tick up a little bit with the weather we've had over the last couple of weeks. So because that fungus, which is always present on the plant, it only produces the sporidesmin toxin under certain environmental conditions. We are seeing that the overnight lows haven't got sufficiently low to stop the fungus from producing those toxins. And so we've also had that warm, humid weather as well, which is sort of promoting that toxin production. So those toxic spores will harbour in the base of the feed base, so at the base of the sward. So there are apparently some spore counts that are getting up in the 20,000 sort of bracket from what I saw briefly last week. So obviously those sentinel spore counts are sentinel, so they sort of indicate that on that microclimate of that farm there are potentially problems, but the advice is always that, you need to monitor the local ones, but if you see in your local area that they're getting up there, then look at maybe performing your own, because across a farm, those spore counts can vary quite a fair bit.
Yep. Now, it's similar to a feed test, how we collect those spore counts?
Very sort of similar in collection. You need to get a good pair of scissors and trim right down to the bottom of the sward to get those spores in the sample. So you wouldn't probably go along and necessarily pick it the same way a cow would necessarily eat it, but you do want to get the whole length of the paddock, so of the pasture, so that you can collect the part that's most likely to have the
so down
spores
to dirt
at the bottom.
sort of thing.
Yeah, right down to the base. So, otherwise pretty similar, and then submitting it to a local vet clinic who may forward it on to...
Oh, so you can test for it, can you?
Yeah, we can. We aren't actually set up it's on our to-do list to set up so that we can do it, because it's actually a reasonably similar sort of procedure to doing a worm egg count. You sort of just put some water in with the plant and shake it all up, and then decant some water off and look at it under a microscope. I haven't done it for many, many years, but it's a pretty similar procedure to just collecting a worm egg count. You just need to have a special... it's a slightly different counting chamber to a worm egg count, and you just need to order one of those in to be able to perform it. So I actually broke one at my last job once. That was one of my departing gifts.
And you mentioned there Paspalum Staggers, and remind us what we're looking for on the seed heads, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's that black crusty material, and I've actually been keeping an eye on the paspalum whenever I see it, and I haven't seen any as of yet, but I am sort of anticipating that we will see it. And it's not necessarily the seeds; it's that black crusty material that accumulates on the tips of the plants. And I'm sure with the weather we've had of late that we'll start to see some. And on some farms, it really seems to have taken off in some parts as well. So
yeah, off the top of your head, you may not be able to answer it, but when are we starting to get out of that danger zone as far as temperatures for things like the facial eczema, the spores, and
off memory, that was 18 degrees. So
it's not too cold.
No, it's reasonably sort of mild conditions that can cause it, and so once we start to fall below that 18 degrees threshold, then the production should start to go down.
I guess the same as the pasture growth, isn't it? As it goes away,
yes,
or
absolutely
reduces, and so does a lot of the other issues that we face with that high moisture, high humidity.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what have you seen locally then, Charles, as far as toxic or plant toxicity? You've got about 3 lined up, I think.
Yeah, so we've had a few sort of interesting cases that I wouldn't quite say are directly related to the weather necessarily that we've had recently, but they are common plants that exist in Gippsland that I thought over time they'd probably make up enough to do a podcast. So one of them was a Prussic acid case that Alison actually saw at the end of last year. And I also personally saw at the end of last year also a case of St. John's wort. And another one that I thought we would have a brief chat about was Bracken Fern.
Right, which there's pockets of a lot of that around here.
Yeah. So Bracken Fern can be quite prolific on some places, and I think because it's so sort of ubiquitous in our environment, we forget that it can actually act as a toxic plant. So
yeah. Now, just quickly on that, when we're talking about it, how hungry does stock have to be before they eat that stuff?
Well, it really depends. So being hungry is definitely
because they won't preferentially graze that over.
Some young stock will when we're talking about things like Bracken Fern, but also just plants in general. Young stock are very
just curious
animals. That's probably the best way to describe it. And they will often play with fire and eat things that they probably wouldn't if they had a bit more wisdom. So we do definitely see these plant toxicities do more commonly occur in young animals because they just haven't figured out what's appropriate to eat and what's not. And
Natural selection, maybe.
maybe, yeah. And in these cases that we've seen, there was plenty of other feed available that they...
Amateur hour. That was my phone for everyone listening. So I'll put that on silent.
So, yeah, we've definitely seen these cases, particularly with the Bracken Fern and the St. John's wort, where, you know, these animals had every opportunity to eat literally anything that would have been better for them than what was in front of them with regards to these weeds. So it's certainly not always a case of they've been starved to the point they had no other choice. Often they do have a choice and they make a bad one.
Yeah, right. So we'll say with the Bracken Fern, what actually happened and what's the issue that we see with Bracken?
Yeah, so this was quite an interesting case actually, and for me as a vet, every so often you get a case that makes you remember to start at the beginning and take your blinkers off a little bit and think about the whole problem, because it nearly caught me out.
What did you think it was initially?
So the client rang me up and said, "Oh, I've had a heifer that's aborted. She's got a bloody back end, and now she's got a urinary tract infection, and they just requested some antibiotics to deal with the urinary tract infection, and it was on a Friday, and I couldn't get out there until the following week, and the client also couldn't yard the animal that particular day. So it made sense for us just to treat her over the weekend with some antibiotics, and I scheduled a visit for the following week just to see how she was going. And they sent me a video, and this cow was straining to urinate. So to me, it looked reasonable that it could be a post-abortion urinary tract infection. But having said that, urinary tract infections in cattle are quite uncommon. So in my 8-year career, I've probably seen 2 or 3. So it's not a common sequelae of abortion. You know, a lot of cows abort their calves and don't get a urinary tract infection.
What was that? What was that flash word you just used?
Sequelae.
Sequelae.
Consequence.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry. And so, you know, it didn't seem unreasonable to treat that cow for a UTI. Yep. But at the back of my mind, I was going, I wonder if there is something more to it, because, yeah, it's not a common thing to happen. So I went out the following week to go see this heifer, and initially I looked at her urine, and interestingly, when I first took a urine sample, which if you sort of tickle the cow below the vulva, they'll often urinate for you. It's a trick you learn in vet school. And the urine that she initially produced was clear. And we thought, this is good. And I tested it with a urine dipstick, and there was no blood in it. And then I did a rectal exam and was expecting to feel, you know, a uterus that's possibly lost a fetus, and, you know, there's a bit of distension in the uterus. And I stuck my hand in and I thought, no, this cow actually feels like it's pregnant. That's not normal. And then continued having a palpate, and the bladder was about the size of an orange, and it was really firm. And when I sort of... What size should it be? Bigger? It depends on when they're at the stage of, you know, have they urinated today or not, sort of thing. If they've just urinated, it's often not palpable at all. Sometimes they can, particularly with really big cows, they can be like the size of a basketball. And when you're trying to preg testing around that urinary bladder can actually be really difficult. But for it to be firm the way that it was, at first I was like, is this a mass of, like, a cancer of some sort? And when I sort of had it in the palm of my hand trying to feel what it was, the cow urinated, and all this port wine coloured urine come out of the cow. And I thought, this is really, really strange. So I got the ultrasound out, which I wouldn't normally do for a sick cow, and popped that in, and the cow was still pregnant, and was able to see a lot of cancers on the surface of that bladder. And so we collected some urine, and I ended up taking that urine sample back to the clinic, and could see a lot of really unusual looking tissue cells on the urinary sample that I collected, and also it was just full of bacteria. So there was a secondary
Like
bacterial infection. So we were right on the money by treating a UTI, but the primary problem was that cow had a bladder cancer.
Right. So how does this relate to a plant?
Yeah. So when I was sort of examining the cow, I said to the client, I said, "Oh, do you have any Bracken Fern on your property?" And she said, "Yeah, we do have a patch of it, but she hasn't been on it like in that paddock for quite a while." And then I asked, has this heifer ever had warts or been in a mob of cattle that had warts? And she looked at me and she said, interestingly, yes, when they were young stocks, they also did have an outbreak of warts.
Yeah, that's quite common too, isn't it?
Both very common scenarios here. So this is one of those cases, it's one of those things you get taught at vet school, but it's been nearly 8 years and this was the first time I'd seen it. So because there was that historic exposure of those two risk factors, there is a correlation, and it's a known sort of association between the two, that if cattle are exposed to Bracken Fern whilst they're in the midst of a wart outbreak across that particular mob, you can get permanent bladder cancers in the urinary bladder. So sometimes that can take months to years before it starts to show any sort of true effect of it. And the reason is that obviously the warts are caused by a virus that just goes through the mob, and the virus itself is usually pretty benign, like all of us, we get warts, especially if you're around kids and things like that, and the warts eventually just shrivel up and fall off, and there's no real consequence. But if you're exposed to that virus and exposed to a severe carcinogen at the same time, like a Bracken Fern, then we can get bladder cancer as a result. Is
there much of a risk for the rest of the heifers?
Pardon?
Because they went through the same situation, I guess.
Yeah, so in terms of who gets a bladder cancer and who doesn't, it's hard to tell. And the other thing is, there could be others in the mob that have got it, but they haven't tipped over into a point that it's severe enough to cause obvious disease, but they could potentially have some bladder cancers there. I mean, cows are remarkably resilient. Like this cow's bladder had to be absolutely full of cancer before it was detectable. It's not something that would show up in a subclinical state. Unfortunately, even with the most diligent managers and stock hands on the world in the planet, cows will go from being perfectly fine with bladder cancer to all of a sudden really sick just because of the nature of how they are. They're just very resilient creatures. So
yep. So where's she at the minute? You trying to get her through the calve, or is she?
No, unfortunately, because of the, I guess, sort of severe suffering that cow would have gone through, because she was only 12 weeks pregnant as well. She had another 6 months until she would have calved. So unfortunately, we had to elect to humanely euthanize that cow just because there was no treatment options available. So pretty upsetting for everyone involved. And I think probably, like I said, for me it was a reminder that I could have very easily just gone, it's just aborted, and thought nothing of it. It I guess reinforced for me that nothing really replaces a hands-on exam as well. Sometimes you start to think, am I really providing much in what I do, especially when you examine a lot of normal animals, and after a while you start to question the usefulness of it a little bit. But every so often, you find yourself getting caught out a little bit with just that remembering to be thorough, I guess.
Yep. So. Now, Bracken, if you don't have the warts, are there other risks associated with grazing like that?
So again, young stock can be quite curious about Bracken, and sometimes it can be quite palatable in its younger sort of immature phase. And if cattle do eat large amounts of it, they can also get a hemolysis syndrome, which is where the cattle start breaking down their own red cells as well. So that can present quite similarly to a Theileria, where they might be quite weak from being anemic. Right. But the difference with Theileria versus a Bracken Fern is that because the red cell breakdown is so severe and so sudden, they'll often urinate like red urine as well. So it yeah, we don't see that as commonly. Like these are not common sequelae, but they are certainly a risk factor. So, yeah, it is probably just worth, I think, remembering because, like you and I both know, there's a lot of Bracken Fern around. So I guess just being a little bit mindful that, yeah, you probably wouldn't want to put your young stock anywhere near it. And try if you have to put cattle in a paddock with it, probably pick older cattle that are going to know better than to eat it.
I guess monitor too if you start seeing some nipped off heads. Then
Exactly.
So, interestingly, we were driving home between some properties a few weeks ago, and there was a cow that was urinating what was bright red out the back end. And I thought, oh crikey, that does look good. And I know the producer, so I thought I'd better call him up and see. He's on he lives next door to them and whatever else. And then all of a sudden I realised they're veggie growers, and the next day I came past, there was a tub of beetroots had been tipped over, so he was just feeding them beetroot, and so everything was coming out bright red sort of thing. So.
I actually had a friend that got caught out with that with their own child
recently.
Gave them a real fright. It can be quite scary
Until the whole
when
family
something like that
starts
happens. Worried that the kid was really sick and just a lot of beetroot dip. So.
It's good stuff. What's next then, Charles? What's the next plant?
So we could probably talk about St. John's wort leading in from the young stock topic as well because,
Now, we didn't actually describe, most people would know what the Bracken Fern looks like. Obviously it's in its name, it's fernish, very tough and waxy. What does St. John's wort look like?
St. John's wort has got a very sort of bright yellow flower. If you actually went on our Herd Solutions Facebook page, we actually popped a photo of it up.
I did see, yeah.
It was quite a few months ago now. It was late last year, but the client kindly submitted it to us because, again, when I looked at this calf and it had the sort of stereotypical photosensitization, one of the things we obviously talked about was the facial eczema, but it wasn't really the right time of year. It was either October or November, so just way too early to be a case of facial eczema. Yeah. But presented very similarly. So it was a young Hereford steer, and all of its face was really, really sensitive. So the reason the client actually rang me up was she said, "Oh, my calf is head flicking really violently," and she sent me a video, and its head was just like flicking around all over the place,
like trying to brush off flies or something. Like
it was just really distressed and unhappy, and it was one of the things that I thought of straight away. But the other thing I thought of was the ryegrass toxicity as well, which we've talked about previously, but again, it wasn't really the right time of year to be seeing those types of conditions. So I went out and took a look, and every time I tried to, and initially the exam didn't look too sort of exciting, but its legs were very red and inflamed where it had the white coming up its knees.
What breed was?
It was a Hereford.
Hereford,
And when I went to sort of have a look in its mouth as part of your general physical exam, when I had to touch its nose to look into its mouth, it just went absolutely ballistic. And I thought, it's really, really painful in these white patches. And so we were suspicious that it was some sort of photosensitization. So we pulled some blood and sent that away. And we even went for a drive in the paddock, but it was right after I got it must have been in November, because it was right after I got the new Hilux, and I was really worried I'd set a paddock on fire, because apparently Hiluxes can do that when they're hot off the shelf.
Yeah, right.
So I drove in the paddock, and I got out and actually walked for a little bit because I was a bit too nervous, because the feed was really high. It was all really good quality feed. Yeah. Couldn't see any weeds, and everything else in the mob looked fine. And we were sort of scratching our heads going, what's caused the photosensitization? Like the paddock looks really clean. It's not the right time of year for a facial eczema. So we treated it accordingly, and we got the blood results back, which confirmed it. And the client was also similarly perplexed. And so she kept on looking after I left, and eventually on the roadside, on the other side of her fence, found some St. John's wort that the calf would have had to have stuck its head through the fence to
Have a nibble on.
consume. So
Do they need much of it? Do they?
no,
Really?
no, they don't. It can be quite a potent cause of photosensitization. And when we think about photosensitization, I think we mentioned this briefly in the facial eczema one, but in the facial eczema podcast we did last year, but we've got what we call primary and secondary photosensitization. So most photosensitization is secondary, so there is damage to the liver,
That's right.
which causes the accumulation of phytoerythrin, which is a normal breakdown product of grass. So that's where you get your things like St. John's wort, not St. John's wort, your heliotrope, Patterson's curse, facial eczema, all those sorts of things. There's actual damage to the liver that causes the secondary photosensitization, whereas St. John's wort causes primary and secondary photosensitization. So there is some liver damaging properties to it, but also it contains a toxin in it that directly reacts with UV light in the bloodstream once it's absorbed. So there doesn't have to be the liver damage to cause that photosensitization. And interestingly enough, like that client nursed that calf and found that case very, very quickly and kept it, because she had undercover yards, she kept it undercover until it started to get better. And because of that management, she was able to avoid that horrific sort of skin peeling that you see.
Did you say though the liver damage would have happened with that one as well?
Yeah, so when I did some reading on it later on, I did find that, you can get some liver damage. So some of the photosensitization can be secondary, but most of it is primary with the St. John's wort. Yeah.
Yep. So she's so you retained that heifer.
I think it was a steer. I'm pretty
steer.
sure of memory. So it was just a fattening cattle sort of scenario, anyways. But very lucky steer. So
Rightio. Oh, that's interesting because you do see it on the roadside quite a bit.
And once I sort of, it's one of those things where, once you notice it, the more I drove around, I was like, oh, wow, it's everywhere. So sometimes it's just, I guess the seasonal conditions are quite, conducive to it for whatever reason. So
yeah, and I'm assuming that the toxic levels in plants change in growing phases too, do they?
Yeah, they certainly can. And also, I can't say so much for St. John's wort. I would say, irrespective of the time of year, St. John's wort would probably be toxic. But with toxins in general, plants that are stressed with nutrients or moisture, or right after, a break in a drought, they can sometimes change their toxic profiles as well. So, absolutely. And it depends on the type of plant and the type of toxin. But, certainly we can see variations depending on the season. So,
yeah. Right, and what was the other one?
Yeah, so Alison went out and actually saw this case. So I wasn't present for it, but it did happen in East Gippsland, and we thought it was worth a mention. Is prussic acid toxicity in a family of Poaceae, and I hope I've said that correctly, plants that were rendered out from a drain clean with some machinery to clean some drains out on a property. And so they were pulled out of the drain with a digger and popped along the fence line. And then the cattle were moved into that paddock and they had, lots of other feeds available. They had grain and they had lots of good quality pasture and things like that. But because they were young animals, they walked up to these little green shoots that have been, dredged up from out of the drain, and they thought that was a good idea to eat those as well. And it was quite interesting because even though, that family has been identified as a cause of prussic acid toxicity, those two particular plants were not. So it was a reasonably sort of novel discovery of the prussic acid toxicity in those two plant species because they hadn't been associated with the prussic acid toxicity in the past. And the prussic acids cause it's called I'm trying to think of the name in my head, cyanogenic glycoside toxicity. So basically causes the heart muscles to start acting quite erratically.
So cyanide poisoning?
Yeah, cyanide.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So it creates a cyanide environment in the plant, which causes very rapid sudden death once the animal. So the animals, I think Alison said they were noticed at 10 o'clock was being, perfectly fine, and then that afternoon they come out and there was several dead ones. And
Oh, really?
It happens very, very quickly. Yeah.
So it stops the heart, does it? Or?
Yeah, it does. And so apparently, and there was one that actually survived, and apparently, because like all things, it's often dose dependent. If they can survive that initial period, they'll often go on to have no ongoing issues if you can keep them alive. But the primary mode of toxicity is that cyanide, so it's an oxygen starvation type issue, so it can be very, very rapidly fatal.
Right. As in the oxygen gets starved, even though it might have good blood supply. Yeah,
and so it's to do with a chemical reaction that occurs at the cellular level. Right. So even though they can still breathe, the oxygen can't be converted. This is going way back to like second year biology.
I was going to say it's getting a bit above my pay grade.
But it's to do with a mechanism at the cellular level that stops them from sort of using oxygen correctly off memory.
And that only affects the heart though, does it?
Oh, this is again probably getting a bit beyond my memory state. But probably the important thing to note with those types of things is that it is a sudden death. So often there'll be acute frothing at the mouth, bellowing, fitting, things like that, and it is often rapidly fatal. Often they have really bright red mucous membranes as well, so that's a common hallmark with these cyanide type issues.
That's low oxygenated blood, is it?
It's actually hyperoxygenated. So again, because it's at a cellular level, and again this is my correct memory of it, the oxygen is there, but it can't be used.
Gotcha.
So
it's not getting used up.
Yeah, so the oxygen creates that bright red sort of appearance, but it doesn't, can't be used properly. So that's where we sort of see things like that there. And always worth getting your vet out to probably check cases like that, even if you are suspicious that's what it is, because the one thing that it will closely mimic that we ruled out in the early cases is anthrax. And so
we talked about that recently, actually.
We did, yeah. So there was some anthrax exclusion occurred before going ahead and touching those animals. So.
Yeah, now that prussic acid, that's in sorghum and a few other things as well?
It may be. I haven't heard of cases of it in that, but I'd have to double check it.
Yeah, well, I think in the young plant, this is my understanding, in the young plant there's levels of it and then it dissipates as they get more mature and things like that. What I was thinking is that certain plants would carry a level of it, and it's been aware of what plants.
Yeah, and again, because these plants were stressed by the fact that they'd been dug up out of the ground, was certainly a risk factor as well. So
now they're a water...
so it was a plant. Sort of... Yeah, it's a plant that likes to live in drains and riverbanks and things like that. Yeah. So, not something you would find in your normal pasture environment. But I think it probably just lends itself to just being mindful of things like that. And also, I've seen cases over the years where people have thrown their lawn clippings and things like that over the fence, and a lot of garden variety plants can actually be quite toxic. So,
a question off the top then. Rhubarb leaves.
Rhubarb.
Because I was always told never to feed them, they're poisonous or toxic. My mate feeds them to his sheep all the time, and they're the fattest, healthiest sheep I've ever seen. So.
Right, I haven't heard of rhubarb.
No. Rhubarb leaves it was, I think, more specifically. But yeah, it's one of those things my grandfather probably told me years ago, and I believed him, but I should check that one out.
And then again, maybe it come down to something they saw years ago that was due to an environmental... case, and it may have been a moment in time toxicity, but haven't had rhubarb come up before.
No, or watermelon skins. My mother told me never to eat watermelon skins. So.
Same for the reason of the pips, or so you don't grow a watermelon in your tummy.
I'm not sure why. There's a lot of us. I thought she would have wanted us to eat everything possible of the fruit, but very good. All right, anything else on that, Charles, before we sign off?
Probably the other one to just mention briefly is nitrates as well, because, again, we're in that time of year where, we've had a lot of overcast sort of days, and that can lend itself to nitrate toxicity, especially if nitrogen fertilisers have been put out on a lot of forage crops as well. So I guess just being careful with those first grazers if anyone's looking at putting cattle out on crops.
Yeah, and
in
you were
the next
saying
couple of
before
weeks.
the plant overnight accumulates that nitrate,
Yeah,
and it needs the sun or the photosynthesis to actually
complete
use
that
up.
process.
Yeah, so if we've
that's
gone
right.
overnight and then a cloud, it's sort of almost counterintuitive to what I think would be a bad situation. But yeah, the longer it stays in that non-growing active sort of phase, I guess the levels build up more.
Yeah, that's right. So if you get a nice sunny day, the photosynthesis process can complete. Whereas, if you get an overnight condition where those nitrates accumulate and then you get a really overcast day, and then you get the perfect storm where you put some young, hungry animals out there that guts themselves on it, then we can definitely see cases of nitrate toxicity.
Yeah.
And probably worth noting, because we've heard of this happening, not often, but just in the area from year to year, is that those nitrates can also survive the silaging process as well. So that I do know of cases where animals have been knocked over with sorghum silage from nitrate exposure.
Yeah. Will a feed test show that up?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. You've just got to, I guess, be careful, because obviously in a crop it may be a bit sort of
Patchy sort of thing.
patchy.
Right.
So, you need to get a good core sample to be sort of certain, and trying to probably establish whether the nitrates are going to be a problem before you make the silage would be preferable, rather than sort of hoping it'll be okay and popping it in silage and then finding out later on that it's no good. So
Yeah, expensive process these days to do it, so get it right in the first place. It is interesting though how those levels can change, because if you go out and test one day, you think we're right to go, and then a couple of cloudy days, and all of a sudden your levels are going to be way too high, I guess.
Yeah, and we've actually got some like test strips, sort of similar to the urinary test strips, that just change colour with litmus paper. So we sometimes use those. It's a bit more crude than a test, like a proper feed test, but if the paper changes colour, it's pretty good confidence you don't want to use it. If it's negative and you still want a bit of extra confidence, then you might send it away. But if it changes colour in front of you, then it's probably just give it a bit more time. So.
Oh, there you go. A lot in that one, Chels. So thank you for coming in. Take care of yourself. We don't want any... Oh, we love hearing a good story, but maybe someone else, a friend next time, or your partner's done some damage, not Chelsea again.
Yeah.
All right, until next time, thank you.
Great.
We'll catch you later.
Thanks, Al.
A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future. This episode was brought to you by Herd Solutions, your local farm animal vets, servicing Maffra to Mallacoota.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.